Hey guys, it's Casey and welcome back to my channel, or really, welcome back to what's left of my channel after 3 weeks on the missing persons list, the literal missing persons list, the legal missing persons list that the government keeps when you go missing, which I was, which incidentally is great practice for the fine art of morality. Add to that the not so small matter of me being one of only 2 doctors, the most senior of doctor, which sounds absolutely insane to me, at a small outback hospital that we're keeping together pretty much through sheer will of force, duct tape, and caffeine alone. So, well, I guess with all that combined, it's fair to say that me and the Grim Reaper have a standing lunch date that we keep awkwardly having to reschedule. Now, don't get me wrong, that is not me saying that I want to die. Not today, not tomorrow, not during my already scheduled breakdown next Tuesday. In fact, if we're splitting wish lists, I would prefer not to die at all, at least not in this place. I would quite like to see the Beyond the Veil at home, but I do not want to die in this place. But on the inevitable day that my heart gives out, probably mid-rant about LED headlights, I'd like my exit to be memorable and logistically simple and just poetic enough to make the coroner go, huh? And if I'm honest, a sky burial by Vulture checks all 3 boxes. Every culture on planet Earth has invented elaborate ways of dealing with the annoying problem of what to do with the human body once the owner has permanently checked out. Some wrap it in silk and stick it in a mausoleum, hoping that the ancestors will appreciate the granite real estate. Some burn it, scatter it, pickle it, or shove it into an urn shaped like a soccer ball. Some spend decades and small fortunes preserving corpses so they look suspiciously well rested while gathering dust in velvet boxes beneath polite plaques. But beneath all this ritual and rose-scented denial is a very simple truth. We are meat, not metaphorically. No, I am talking about biologically, nutritionally, unavoidably meat. And while the living write poems about the soul drifting off into the cosmos, the leftover bones and gristle are left to the mercy of whatever cultural tradition you or your next of kin could afford at the time of death. Now, of course, where I come from, it's no different. A lot of the burial rites change from custom to culture, and a lot of these customs and cultures are pretty simple. You pass on your last breath, your name is whispered to the archivist, and then your body passes back to whatever ecosystem claims it first. Some choose moss beds, some drift off into the river. Quite a lot just go up in flames until the sky reclaims them, but for the pragmatic, or I guess really for the penitent, there are the scavengers. Which brings me to one of the more humble burial could be the right word to use in this context, rites from where I come from. Namely, becoming lunch for a congregation of vultures. Yes, a congregation, or a wake, or my personal favorite, a committee. Because apparently the only thing less dignified than having your intestines re-alphabetized by scavengers is knowing that they have a corporate-sounding collective noun. Now, I am not a Rajan. I do not claim to be a Rajan. I could not be a Rajan, even if I wanted to be a Rajan, but I do like a Rajan culture, and by a Rajan burial rites, when somebody dies, their body gets laid out on a huge sun tower in the searing wind. No coffin, no embalming fluid, no sentimental candles. Vultures descend, do what vultures do best, and by dusk, there's nothing left but bleached bones and drifting prayers and a community that has never once had to worry about funeral debt. Now, I know what you're thinking. How barbaric, how uncivilized, and yet, no one from Iraja has ever had to worry about their groundwater being poisoned by embalming fluids or flattening a forest so they can build marble mausoleums, which I personally think is pretty cool, not to mention practical. Because if we're being practical, which we should be, because dying is the least practical thing that you ever do in your entire life, being devoured by nature's ugliest yet most efficient and misunderstood cleanup crew is not the worst fate on offer. Which is why I'm filming this video about the 10 not so bad things about being eaten by vultures, alive or dead. Number 1, you did your part to keep the food chain intact. Let's begin with the least depressive truth. Nature is a messy system held together by teeth, guts, and optimism. Everything eats or is eaten. Even if you're a strict vegan, Your meat suit does not get an ethical exemption once you stop paying taxes. If you imagine your grand final as a peaceful decomposition in a pine box under a tree, allow me to ruin that illusion. Soil creatures are pretty much just vultures without wings or PR departments. Worms, beetles, fungi, all more than happy to break you down very slowly into a substance that's not dissimilar to yesterday's compost. But vultures? They're faster, more efficient. They swoop in and turn you into bird calories and prevent the whole trophic pyramid from collapsing into a pile of unprocessed corpses. Vultures are nature's sanitation workers. Without them, disease would spread faster than gossip at a high school reunion. So, if your last act on Earth is to feed a couple of thermal riding bad boys and girls, congratulations, you have done your part. You have exited stage left without rotting into a biohazard. Some might say that's noble. I personally say it's practical, and if your mother is a clean freak, she might approve. Number 2, you skip the expensive after party. Funerals are really weird, especially modern funerals, because for some reason your cultures have decided that the best way to honor the dead is to gather everybody that they've ever met in their entire lives into a beige carpeted room, feed them bland sandwiches, and spend $15,000 on a fancy box to disguise the fact that nature has very immediate and unstoppable plans with their flesh. A standard modern funeral, the coffin and the plot and the embalming fluid and the weird white roses and really creepy formations will bleed a grieving family like 20 grand in the course of a weekend. Now, sure, cremation shaves off a bit of that price point, but you still have to pay for the incineration and the urn and the privilege of wondering if all that ash is actually your loved one or if it's them plus the leftovers from Thursday's backlog. Because actually think about it. There is no way with cremation, and I'm a fan of cremation. Like I said, we have cremation too. It's just a different kind of cremation where it happens in front of, your loved ones and your family. It doesn't happen in secret. Because when it happens in secret, how do you know that you're actually taking home grandma? How do you know that you're not taking home grandma with a little passenger of Frank from up in the pub who died like 3 weeks ago and nobody claimed his body, so they need to get rid of it somehow, so they've just, hitched him a ride with grandma. You don't have to worry about that with vultures, because with vultures, there's no upcharge on a casket, there's no urn shaped like a golf trophy, and there's no gilded donation to the Let's Keep the Grass Mowed Around Grandma's Headstone Fund, and arguably, most persuasively, there's no funeral director with suspiciously white teeth trying to upsell your sobbing aunt who's just lost her mother on a crystal-encrusted casket for grandma that you're all going to have to chip in for to make her stop crying and not be able to pay your rent that month. You die, you get carted up a mountain or to a Mensa or to the nearest legally questionable open plain, and a team of feathered professionals takes care of the rest, free of charge. The snacks at a normal modern wake are stale shortbread cookies. The snacks at a vulture wake are you. And for some reason, that just feels more honest. Number 3, you feed something that deserves it. Most predators have the decency to kill their meals first before they eat it, which sounds courteous until you realize it's really, really not if you're the meal. Vultures, on the other hand, bless their sun-baked, stinky little hearts, don't bother with the messy part. They wait until your soul is off doing whatever questionable activity it's allowed to do in the afterlife, and then, only then, do they swoop in for lunch. There's no chase scene, there's no bison stampede, there's no melodramatic fight to the death with a bear. You just meat, a buffet-ready course, minus the pain threshold tax. And unlike maggots, who do the exact same job subterraneanly, is that the word? I don't know, I don't speak English, but they do the same job underground, just with far less dignity. Vultures get the job done quickly and professionally, and they do it with dignity, so you don't have to rot and be subjected to bug orgies. Plus, vultures are not picky eaters. They don't have allergies, or they don't care about seasonings or portion control. They don't judge you for your bad cholesterol. They're not going to mind that really weird tattoo you got at 19 years old and never told your mother about. No, they just eat cleanly, thoroughly, and efficiently. In fact, one could argue, and one is because I am arguing it, that Vultures are the only ethical omnivores left on this planet, and so it's the least that we could do to give them a good free meal once in a while. Number 4. No awkward eulogies where everyone lies about you. Have you ever sat through a funeral where the priest solemnly described your Uncle Greg as a generous, kind-hearted man of good character, even though you knew that Uncle Greg once stole $600 from Grandma's purse, meaning that she couldn't afford rent that month, just because he was waiting for his disability payments to come through after he faked a leg amputation? Funerals are just social theatre for the living. Awkward stage plays starring the deceased in the role of a mute prop that everyone pretends to adore. Now, picture this. You skip the casket entirely. Instead, you exit stage left into the open sky where a ring of patient vultures are circling, waiting to convert your mortal failings into biodegradable bird poo. There's no eulogy where your old roommate tries to spin chronically flaky into free-spirited. There's no step-cousin who you haven't spoken to in 15 years, drunk crying into the mic about the time you made him spaghetti that one Christmas. With vultures, there's no moral grandstanding. There's no awkward condolences. There's no weird, cheap floral arrangements that die 2 days later. Your body becomes lunch and nobody fake cries. Your final truth becomes, I was meat and now I'm lunch. Honest, clean, with zero hypocrisy. Number 5. You're part of something older than any civilization. Sky burials are nothing new. Cultures around the world have been practicing it for millennia. Long before we invented the padded coffin or cemetery real estate scams, people understood the simple elegance of letting the sky reclaim the body. There's a strange comfort in knowing that when you sign up to be a vulture's snack pack, you're also signing up to be part of a ritual that's older than kings and cathedrals, and really even older than the word burial itself. Your death isn't hidden away in a vault of marble and weeping angel statues. No, instead it's this open-aired performance starring the sun and the wind and a cast of scrappy winged recyclers. And in a world where you're also desperately craving something to be meaningful, trust me, there is nothing more meaningful than to be briefly but undeniably, irrevocably vital to someone else's survival. Number 6. It is probably better than being eaten by a kraken. Okay, let's weigh our options here. Imagine that you're a very unfortunate shipwreck victim, just bobbing around in brine, when all of a sudden a mythological horror grabs you by the leg, drags you down, and spends the next 20 minutes ripping you into appetizer-sized ribbons. Meanwhile, your last thoughts on this Earth, on this entire planet, are probably very salty and drowned. Alternatively, you could be nibbled on by fish, or a bear, or a very committed colony of bull ants. In this carnival of uncomfortable deaths, vultures are pretty much the best case scenario. Sure, they're super ugly up close, and sure, they start with the eyes pretty much every single time. However, in the sliding scale of grisly exits, getting gently dismembered by ugly big bird beats getting drowned and crushed and tentacle whipped by a mythical sea monster 9 out of 10 times. Kraken. Big teeth. No table manners. Bad Yelp reviews. Vultures. Polite enough to wait until you're properly dead. Usually. But you'd also be very, very surprised at how high a bar that is in the animal planet. Number 7. Makes for an interesting epitaph. Your gravestone, or your memorial plaque, or your scribbled note on a lamppost, I don't know, I don't judge. Whatever works for you. It reads, Here lies Johnny J. McGillicuddy, fed an entire wake of vultures on a random Tuesday morning, and in doing so, probably saved half the forest from pestilence. May he rest in unrecognizable peace. Isn't that so much better than beloved aunt gone too soon, or worse? He loved golf. Your ancestors got entire tomb inscriptions about valor and courage and that one duel they definitely won. So why shouldn't you get a line or two about closing the loop on the food chain? Instead of just being buried and forgotten about by the pages of history, you can become a myth in your own family for like 5 generations. At family reunions, they will whisper between each other, the children. They'll be like, did you hear about great Uncle Barry, who pretty much became a sacrificial buffet for vultures? Iconic, weird, memorable. At any rate, it's a lot better to be remembered as the guy who got eaten by birds than it is to be remembered, or really, if we're to be honest, forgotten as that guy who died of old age in his recliner while watching the Wheel of Fortune. Number 8. Plenty of time to reflect on the life you have lived. Well, except for the part where you're getting eaten by vultures. Death is famously contemplative. For the people left behind, not so much the actual dead people themselves, because they're a little bit busy being inanimate objects to really spend time pondering the philosophical questions that are required of being dead. But just for the sake of morbid humor, let's imagine that after you die, you kind of just like hang around for a little bit, kind of like in a really ghostly peanut gallery. Vultures are not particularly fast eaters. They like to savor their meals. They like to coordinate. They like to find the best angle to pluck out your liver while bickering amongst themselves like old relatives over a holiday roast. This time in which they're feasting on your earthly remains gives your spirit, or the last dregs of brain chemistry going on in your head, a little bit of time to hover and think about things that you probably should have thought about while you're alive. Like, did I pay my taxes? Did I really need to buy that extended warranty? Did I really love Alex, or did I just really hate being single at that point in my life? I just think there's something so poetic about slowly fading away into the cosmic recycling bin while your earthly regrets are literally getting digested by nature's cleanup crew. Of course, this assumes that you're not still actually alive during the process, because if you are, well, then I guess there goes your eyeballs, and you can't do much contemplating without those. Number 9. Nobody has to pretend that you're sleeping. Let's be honest, the singular worst thing about modern day funerals is the way that we all have to pretend that the person in the box looks peaceful. They don't. They look like a taxidermied experiment. They look like the descendant of Frankenstein, and everyone stands around whispering about how good they look, like we're supposed to pretend that they're not half made of beeswax and have their mouths sewn shut. When your final act involves vultures instead of velvet drapery and fake lilies, there's no awkward potluck. There's no funeral home that has to turn the air conditioning up to the high heavens in order to preserve the guest of honor. No eulogies by people who don't actually know you, but for some reason feel entitled to give sweeping statements about your journey. Instead, there's just raw sky and dirt and a chorus of birds doing what birds have been doing since the dawn of time, since they were dinosaurs. Nobody is there to fight over your jewelry. Nobody is there to sigh dramatically about whether you would have preferred Amazing Grace over My Way. Nobody's there to look solemnly while secretly checking their phone in the corner. Number 10. Instant stardom in the animal kingdom. Let's be honest, you didn't get famous in your lifetime. Your art never went viral. Your short-lived podcast about mushroom foraging never broke 10 listeners. But do you know who's going to remember you in exquisite detail? Every vulture in a 5-mile radius. To them, you're not Derek, the middle manager with a taste for craft beer. No, you're Derek, the all-you-can-eat buffet that gave Gary the vulture such a protein high that he'll be bragging about it until he molts. Gary will remember you. Sheila, his mate, will remember you. Their chicks will remember your glorious, thick, marbled thighs, and they, as a family, will fly overhead for about a month afterwards just in hopes that you will miraculously respawn. You never went viral on TikTok, so what? You went viral in a way that actually has substance and meaning. You went viral in the food chain in a way that is going to be felt in future generations of vultures for years, hundreds of years to come. There are much worse ways to be remembered. So, why am I talking about this? Why am I wasting time talking about vultures and why you should feed yourself to vultures? Well, because one day you and me and your neighbor with the 3 annoying yappy chihuahuas that won't be quiet every time you walk past the house, In time, we will all do our part in the carbon cycle, whether we want to or not. And while you might fantasize about a dignified Viking pyre or a marble tomb, or at least a nice little cremation, the universe is really quite indifferent to your posthumous aesthetic preferences. And sometimes, even if you don't want to, you will end up as vulture chow. And that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. Sure, vultures aren't cute and they don't pose well for gravestone portraits, but they are honest and very, very practical creatures. They do for free what humans try to replicate with caskets and tombs and embalming fluid that ironically just delays the inevitable and makes the entire process even more messy than it would be in the first place. Vultures, on the other hand, unlike the embalming fluid, they are a very clean exit. They are your last good deed, your last viral moment in the sky. So instead, don't cringe at the pecking and the feathers. Instead, consider it your last ultimate confession. You came from dirt and breath and bacteria, and you return the favor with one final donation to the food chain. It is really the most honest of legacies. Would I suggest that you book your vulture wake tomorrow? No, probably not. For one thing, local bylaws, especially in modern era, which is where you are, and I'm hoping that it's not there when I die, but who knows what tomorrow brings. But they are very weirdly fussy about leaving unattended human corpses in public parks. But when the day comes, as it inevitably will for all of us, I hope that you will consider the humble Vultures offer. A quick, clean exit that is free and you don't have to pay for disgusting embalming fluid or overpriced caskets. And maybe it's not as glamorous as a pyramid or turning your ashes into a fake diamond that your granddaughter will inevitably lose under the fridge, but it is sustainable, it is ancient, it is honest, it is true, and it gives back to the world that you've lived in. And in its own grisly way, it is a final act of honesty. Anyway, this is Casey signing off for the night. As always, stay weird out there, stay safe, and if you see a vulture circling ahead before your time, just sit down and have a snack. They'll wait. They're very polite like that.